or it may or may not be true, because I do like to put fraudulent records, especially in the electronic realm on the internet, and because we're not able to go and actually confirm in newspapers, which you could always bring up the question of what they put in the newspaper as actually being factually correct. Especially if you do something like see the version of the Wall Street Journal, you can get here in Texas, and then you cross-reference it with the microfiche version of the East Coast edition. Do you know this? That the East Coast edition, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal have completely different layouts than whatever we get down here in Texas. It's something else, right? However, there are, at least there were as of 2 months ago, versions of not only articles but information available on the website of one of the major areas of concern. And I believe there is substantiation in my reviews of DoD contracts regarding an arrangement between Elbit and what was alleged, at least at the time, to be the United States Marine Corps when it came to optics associated with the kind of technology one would need for night vision goggles. Now, this is a big concern to me because when I was in Houston, I tried to get something to DC that I'm concerned actually ended up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in time for what was alleged to be a bunch of mail bombings that went through the FedEx, as opposed to it actually getting to the DOJ. But nobody wanted to acknowledge that, right? Nobody wanted to acknowledge that not only they claimed U.S. versus Harvey, but they'd also claimed U.S. versus Flynn, and then they actually tried to pan out scenarios to prove that they could flip those cases so that people like me would not be able to use them for what they're intended for. You guys know what the case U.S. versus Flynn is about? It's about a car bomb. It's about a car bomb being used as an act of political reprisal in a case concerning labor racketeering. You know, labor racketeering is a very significant matter, right? You know this, right? So when you accuse somebody of racketeering, including labor racketeering, sometimes there are very significant charges, things like murder, including murder through unconventional means, including murder that involves a very significant and, at least for the time, very comprehensive form of technology. Let me ask you, what kind of device do you hook up, and what is the actual means by which one actually creates and executes a car bomb? Let's say 1980s. Let's say 1970s. 1960s. What was considered to be the technology that one needed in order to be able to successfully accomplish an execution by car bombing? We're not talking about IEDs today, or are we? Let me ask you, how many IED attacks got chalked up in relationship to casualties involving the United States military in Afghanistan under the leadership of Michael Flynn? Now, I know he was a command officer at the time. He had a rank, and that's how he was referred to, right? But I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about Michael Flynn, post-military service, contractor, including in connection with a company that provides background checks, right? Including in connection with a company that provides consulting services, including consultant services presumably connected to national security related matters associated with the energy sector, right? How many IEDs that occurred in Afghanistan were attributed to or in some way accounted for in connection with Michael Flynn's military service record? Okay. Is that one of the reasons why me trying to bring a case about how I was secretly renditioned as retaliation for trying to report on human test subject experimentation on children involving the development stages of radiological weapons or component materials for military hardware was not supposed to reference precedents that were outlined concerning legal arguments regarding the case U.S. versus Flynn? Would that have been a conflict of interest? How about distribution of dangerous drugs, including the characterization of marijuana as a dangerous drug specific to the relationship associated with its impact on effectuating and normalizing and habituating people to patterns of behavior in U.S. versus Harvey? Okay. There was another reason it was very important that I go ahead and follow up. Oh, yes, LB. LB in a USMC in Fort Worth. Months before Kamala Harris was on site in Fort Worth, while on the same day, at the same time, Senator John Cornyn was where? Where was John Cornyn, the so-called senator, former attorney general of Texas, the same day that Kamala Harris was in Texas at Fort Worth? Where was John Cornyn? Anybody know? Anybody know? John Cornyn was in the city where in November of 2016, right before that major fire in Haifa, there was a fire that killed 4 children. Here in Texas. What was that city? Anybody know? Anybody know? Because that's where John Cornyn was when Kamala Harris was helping to confirm the illegal coinage from the mint in Fort Worth. I know, presumably, officially, she was doing something else. But that also happened, right? And she was also there with that happening while he was where he was. Okay. What happened to the original writer that was on the first version of the DREAM Act as it was presented during the 2008 congressional campaign season? Where was the writer on the DREAM Act specifically discussing the Transportation Safety Administration and outlays that had been proposed connected to border security, specifically port scanners and airport scanners that were going to be under the TSA as part of various kinds of border security initiatives that were originally identified as being connected to what was being proposed in the DREAM Act during the 2008 congressional season? Anybody? Okay. Did anybody look through the DoD appropriations for the year that was about to come up? See, those upgrades that were in the rider would not have been available in 2009, but they could potentially have been available beginning in 2010, couldn't they? Right. And what ended up happening in 2010? Was there something else that had been happening that ended up getting recharacterized? Yes, there was. Right? So, unfortunately, like it or not, before that 2020 campaign stop in Fort Worth, there was already at least 3 years where there could have been an appropriate reconciliation of what that entailed. Right? And even if the first year was one of those time frames during which there might be some conflicting stories because different people had different perspectives, then by February of 2018, that was definitely a time frame when this would have been confirmed, right? And instead of allowing for the district court under an assumed account connected to somebody with the same name as the person of interest here, to be able to set up a secret shadow case concerning a medical claim, a claim for, medical malpractice, they would have actually been delivering on a 300-page package connected to racketeering at the Department of Justice the day they scheduled that phone call. You understand? My understanding is that phone call happened nonetheless. And not only did that phone call happen, but on the same day, a year later, another phone call happened, didn't it? Yes, it did. Did you just not make the delivery that you were anticipating the year before? And so what? You had to do another year? Well, even that, by the way, is 2 years ago, right? So we're way past due for finally getting to the matter at hand. And if you really needed to see a demonstration of some sort of behavioral conditioning in order to test out whatever would be considered the appropriate attenuation, does this seem a bit more prosecutorial? Do I seem like I have more of what would be considered to be the consistency and the acumen, maybe even the tone of voice, maybe even the actual presentation? Does my body language tell you prosecutor? Let me tell you, does my body language present prosecutor now in 2021 any more or less than my body language said prosecutor in October of 1994? Do you want to answer that question yet? Is that supposed to somehow be a part of my sealed juvenile record? Well, that's a big question, right?